Picture this. You're living peacefully in coastal Georgia in 1952. You wake up, go to work, spend time with your family. You have no idea that a U.S. Army ship sits just offshore, deliberately spraying your entire region with experimental chemicals. No warnings, no consent, no knowledge that you've become part of a massive government experiment. This isn't science fiction. This actually happened. Operation Dew exposed over 150,000 square kilometers of American civilians to zinc, cadmium, sulfide, and biological particles. The government kept it secret for 25 years. And the most disturbing part? This was just one of many similar experiments conducted on unwitting American citizens during the Cold War. The year was 1951 when the U.S. Army Chemical Corps began planning what would become one of the most extensive secret experiments ever conducted on American soil. They called it Operation Dew, and it had two phases that would forever change how we view government accountability. Operation Dew wasn't some small-scale test. This was a massive operation designed to answer a terrifying question. Could enemy nations use biological weapons to attack America by releasing them from ships offshore? To find out, the Army decided to use American civilians as test subjects without their knowledge or consent. The first phase, Dew-Y, launched in March 1952. A Navy minesweeper positioned itself off the coasts of Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina. From this ship, Army researchers released clouds of zinc-cadmium sulfide into the air. This fluorescent tracer compound was chosen because it could be easily detected and tracked as it spread inland. But here's what makes this truly sinister. Zinc-cadmium sulfide contains cadmium, which we now know is a probable carcinogen. In 1952, the Army claimed it was safe. They were wrong. The chemical they deliberately released over populated areas is now recognized as potentially cancer-causing. Families, children, elderly people, pregnant women, all exposed without their knowledge to a substance that could harm them. The scope was staggering. The Army covered approximately 60,000 square miles of populated coastal regions. To put that in perspective, that's roughly the size of Florida. Hundreds of thousands of Americans breathed in these experimental chemicals while going about their daily lives. If you're finding this as disturbing as most people do, you'll want to stick around because what happened in Phase 2 will shock you even more. And if you're interested in more hidden history like this, hitting that subscribe button helps us bring you more of these untold stories. Phase 2, known as Dew-2, escalated the experimentation. This time, the Army used aircraft to release not just zinc-cadmium sulfide, but also lycopodium spores, actual biological particles. They wanted to test how aerosol clouds could travel over longer distances and different environments. Think about the implications. The Army was literally conducting biological warfare tests over American cities and towns. They were studying how to disperse particles from the air, measuring how far they traveled, how they settled, and how effectively they could cover large populations. But Operation Dew was just the tip of the iceberg. While researching this operation, you discover it was part of a much larger program of secret experiments on American civilians. Take Operation Sea Spray from 1950. The U.S. Navy sprayed live bacteria, Serratia marcescens, and Bacillus globigii over San Francisco. Unlike Operation Dew's chemical tracers, this involved actual living microorganisms. The results were devastating. At least 11 people were hospitalized, and one person died. The Navy claimed the bacteria were harmless, but people got sick and died anyway. Then there was Operation LAC from 1957 to 1958. The Army sprayed zinc-cadmium sulfide across vast regions of the United States and Canada. They detected the particles up to 1,200 miles away from the release point. Imagine, a single chemical release could affect people across multiple states and even cross international borders. The experiments got even more bizarre. Operations Big Buzz, Big Itch, and Dropkick involved releasing uninfected mosquitoes and fleas over American cities. The military wanted to study how insects could be used as biological warfare vectors, They literally dumped swarms of insects on unsuspecting American communities. What makes these experiments particularly disturbing is the complete lack of informed consent. The government never asked permission. They never warned anyone. Citizens had no idea they were being used as test subjects in potentially dangerous experiments. The ethical violations are staggering. These operations violated basic principles of medical ethics and human rights. The Nuremberg Code, established after World War II to prevent the kind of human experimentation conducted by Nazi doctors, clearly stated that voluntary consent is absolutely essential for any human subject research. Yet here was the American government conducting experiments on its own citizens without their knowledge. But here's what might be the most disturbing part of this entire story. These weren't rogue operations. They were officially sanctioned, well-funded government programs with clear chains of command and detailed documentation. The secrecy surrounding these operations was intense. Classification levels were so high that even many government officials didn't know about them. The experiments were compartmentalized, with different agencies handling different aspects to maintain security. For decades, American families lived in complete ignorance of what had been done to them. Parents never knew their children had been exposed to experimental chemicals. People who developed illnesses later in life had no idea they might be connected to secret government experiments. The truth only began to emerge in the 1970s during congressional hearings. The Senate Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research investigated these programs in 1977, finally bringing some of these operations to light. But by then it was too late for many of the people who had been exposed. A National Research Council review requested by Congress eventually concluded they found no evidence of adverse health effects from the exposure levels used in Operation Dew. But this conclusion raises more questions than it answers. How can you accurately assess health effects when you never told people they were exposed? How can you study long-term consequences when the exposure was kept secret for 25 years? The broader context makes these experiments even more troubling. During the Cold War, the U.S. government was genuinely concerned about biological warfare threats from the Soviet Union. But instead of focusing solely on defensive measures, they decided to conduct offensive research using their own citizens as test subjects. The military mindset of the era treated American civilians as acceptable casualties in the larger Cold War struggle. National security concerns were used to justify violating basic human rights and ethical principles. The ends were supposed to justify the means, but the means involved potentially harming innocent people. These revelations had significant consequences. In 1969, President Nixon ended U.S. offensive biological weapons programs and began moves toward the Biological Weapons Convention of 1972. The public disclosure of these secret experiments played a role in pushing for greater oversight and transparency. But even today, decades after these revelations, important questions remain unanswered. Were there other operations that haven't been disclosed? Are there still classified documents that would reveal additional experiments? The legacy of Operation Dew and similar programs extends far beyond the immediate participants. These experiments fundamentally changed the relationship between the American government and its citizens. They revealed that national security agencies were willing to treat their own people as expendable test subjects. The psychological impact on affected communities was profound. When people learned they had been unknowing participants in government experiments, it shattered trust in institutions. Families wondered if illnesses and deaths might be connected to secret exposures. The betrayal was complete and devastating. What's particularly chilling is how systematic and widespread these programs were. Operation Dew wasn't an isolated incident or a rogue operation. It was part of a coordinated effort involving multiple agencies, extensive planning, and significant resources. The government created an entire infrastructure for experimenting on its own citizens. Modern declassified documents reveal the cold, clinical language used to describe these operations. Military officials wrote reports about target populations and exposure assessments, as if they were discussing enemy territories rather than American communities. The dehumanization was complete. The question that haunts researchers today is whether we know the full extent of these programs. Classification policies mean that some documents may still be sealed. Some operations may never have been disclosed. The true scope of Cold War experimentation on American civilians remains. But what if I told you that Operation Dew was actually the cover story for something much worse, and that recently declassified documents suggest there was a third phase that the government still refuses to acknowledge?